Well, hello, buddy, and welcome back to a new episode of the Showrunner Whisperer. This is your podcast where we take you inside the minds of Hollywood television showrunners and what goes into making a TV show in today's Hollywood landscape. I'm your host, Andy B. As always, first of all, if you're a new listener, welcome. If you're a returning listener, welcome back. So happy to see all of you. We're getting towards the end of July, and first of all, just to clear the air a little bit. I know part two of my chat with Mark Guggenheim was supposed to go out uh, the previous week, but this has been a very busy month for good old Andy with a lot of things with writing and also just things in my personal life. So I apologize that I forgot I had not even put out a update on socials. So I'll get better at that. I promise. I promise. But first of all, I want to thank everyone who had such a huge response to part one of my chat with Mark. And I saw a lot of, there were a lot of things from that interview that I was not expecting to go viral. So it was cool seeing like the Showrunner Whisperer in the Deadline and TV Line, Entertainment Weekly. Big shout out to my good buddy. Uh, at Screen Rants and Cinema Blend and KTEC TV and so on. Always love the love and support. So and so much, so many of you online have responded really well to the interview. Like right now on YouTube, part one is the most viewed episode of the Showrunner Whisperer so far, which makes me super happy, and I appreciate all of you. Again, this has been a product I've been working on for so long that I didn't know how fat people were going to respond to it. How would there be an audience for it? Would I have the same luck that I had when I did something like the Flash podcast for 10 years, basically? So, but once again, thank you so much. And as a reminder right now, because today we are going to release we're releasing part two with my chat with Mark, and we talk about some more stuff about his experience as showrunner and some other untold stories that you haven't heard of before. But I'm going to remind you first that if you haven't done so already, please, and it would mean so much to me, go and hit subscribe to the Showrunner Whisperer wherever you get your podcast at, whether it is Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Audible, you name it. Like, we are on all the platforms. So wherever you get your podcast at, the Showrunner Whisperer is there. And if you don't mind, because this will only take maybe a minute or two of your time, when you're on Apple Podcast, especially on Apple Podcast, hit that 5-star review rating and leave a little review of what you think about the show, because that is the best way to get the show to expand and grow so that we can get more people to tune in. Because here's the thing, not everyone is on social media, which I totally understand, because social media is a shit show these days. And sometimes they discover their shows and podcasts through literally listings on our podcast store. So the more ratings and reviews we get, the higher we get on that podcast store, so that people will discover it. I've seen that we, made it into some of the top categories for TV and film and interviews, which has been amazing. So let's keep going at it. And also, this is a great way to offer your thoughts and what we could do to improve the show. Because I always want to make the podcast the best it can be. So please, I want to hear from you. But yeah, so on this episode, part two with Mark Guggenheim, we talk about, like I said, some of his experiences again for being a showrunner, as well as also his upcoming novel, which if you want to pre-order, there's a link in the show notes. You can go click on and pre-order right now. It comes out in August. And yeah, I'm really excited for you guys to hear it. So I'm going to shut up and just cue the music and let you enjoy. I'll see you at the end. Well, speaking of social media, because I feel Arrow and the Arrowverse really came, because as someone who grew up with Smallville, Twitter wasn't really that big when Smallville was still airing. So by the time you guys came around, that's when we started seeing this kind of more big interaction between the audience and you guys? Because I remember the day when you, Greg, etc. came on Twitter and had joined social media and so on. So like as a showrunner, how much did you guys apply social media? Not listen to, but like take, at least take it in, because again, I know you would be very communicating with fans. You would post title pages, which again, that was a freaking blast in itself of like, what is the next episode going to be called, and then we all had to speculate. So how much did that factor in the writers room of like, let's see what they're saying versus no, this is the line we're drawing, we have to focus on our vision for the show?
Oh yeah, well, I'll tell you. I mean, well, first of all, like we would take it in. We would take it all in. I mean, we were all on Twitter. We would, some of us would live tweet during the episodes. We were always curious to see what Twitter was saying. But the thing that even if we were interested in having the Twitter affect the writers' room, and that's a separate conversation. We're working so far ahead of Twitter. We're working like there's just not the way I sort of describe it is there's no time to turn the oil tank. So a lot of times it was like, oh, Twitter didn't like this, wait till I see next week's episode. Because we're working. Remember that the production is obviously happening very far ahead of actual air, but the writing's happening even further ahead than the production. There's no way to sort of incorporate Twitter's thoughts except to go, shrug and go, it's simply too late. Look, I think I always subscribe to, Stan Lee's. He always said, give the fans what they need, not what they want. I think if that's, that seemed to work out pretty well for Stan in the Marvel Universe, and I always tried to, follow that as well. Read every tweet. I wouldn't say, like I said, it never arrived in time to actually impact the story. It was always taken and appreciated for just information about how the audiences respond.
Was there any particular story you remember where you saw the reaction and you kind of felt that should we have tackled this differently, or should we not? Because I mean, one example I can think of, which is obviously the death of Laurel in season 4, which I know that was, I mean, I know I was very upset about it because Laurel was one of my favorites, but I always wondered, like, was there anything whether it was that one or anything across your time on Arrow and Legend that you felt like maybe we should have had a second go about this?
Well, it's very interesting actually, because I don't even want to call them the Legends fandom and the Arrow fandom, because obviously there's sort of overlap between fandom. But the Legends, what I'll call the Legends tweets and the Arrow tweets, were very, very, very different in terms of tone. Like you would almost go like, these almost have to be completely separate sets of fans, because with the Arrow, we had a lot of angry fans. With Legends, we never did. So it's interesting. I think the death of Laurel, honestly, it wasn't my call. And I also think it's not so much the thing that would have changed Laurel's fate, honestly, wasn't going to be Twitter. What would have changed it is if we had known that we were going to go for 4 more years. Had we known that the show was only reaching its midpoint, I don't think Laurel would have been killed off. But at the time, it was we always sort of saw the show as a 5-year show. It didn't really occur to us that it was going to go beyond that. So I think that if we're talking about hindsight being 2020, I think that's a greater factor. I don't believe in shows, changing course to satisfy a vocal set of fans. And part of that is the way I watch television. I approach all my writing as a fan first, but I'm the kind of fan, do they do things on shows that I don't like as a fan? Sure, all the time. But it never occurred to me to have input in the process. It never occurred to me to showrunner X or showrunner Y should listen to what I have to say. I'm just a member of the audience, and I don't believe, the audience. Television is not. It's not an interactive medium, and I know there's a lot of fans who hate hearing. I totally get that, but it's not. It's just I don't think that produces good art, quite frankly. So yeah, that's my probably controversial sort of opinion. I will say, in terms of things we wish we could have done differently, there's a lot of stuff in season 4. Like season 4 is probably my least favorite of all the seasons, in large part because there were things that in hindsight just didn't work, and things we shouldn't have necessarily tried. Like, I think there's some incredibly strong episodes in season 4. Don't get me wrong. Like, there's some episodes that I think are really, really, really great episodes of Arrow. But overall, as a season, I think the idea to try a lighter tone, it just wasn't, it wasn't true to the show. It wasn't true to what the show, we were going for a lighter tone because the first 3 seasons had been so dark. And bear in mind, like, a lighter tone for Arrow is very different from a lighter tone for most shows.
Yeah.
We still like, ended the mid-season finale with, Oliver and Felicity being attacked and Felicity being paralyzed. I do wish we had approached that whole storyline very differently. I've said this before in other interviews, but like, we always plan every season out of Arrow, but I think the best seasons are the ones where we give ourselves the freedom to alter course, not based on Twitter, but really just based on, how the story is just playing out. And there were things in season 4 that we had specifically planned for at specific moments in time. I just think we stuck to the game plan too rigidly in a lot of places. So if I could sort of go back and redo things, I certainly would. I will say, like, I love the season finale of season 4. We wanted to do an epic, street battle with a lot of extras that felt like, the end of Dark Knight Rises. And I feel like we succeeded in that. There's a lot of groundwork that's done to introduce, the Atom and Ray Palmer. That I think worked extremely well. There, like I said, there's individual episodes that I like a great deal. The finale, again, being a good example. But not, when you do 8 seasons of television, not every season is going to be perfect.
No, of course. No, you're talking about the Atom, and I'm thinking, I'm thinking in an alternate universe where Brandon still would have been. Because I think you said that this part was true, but where he was supposed to be Ted Corridor.
Yeah, that was the original game plan. And look, I think it's interesting. Like, DC was really, really great to work with. They they said yes far more times than they said no. And when they said no, they always had good reasons. And when they said no, it always was followed very quickly with, but how about this? Which is wonderful. I think it's also important to remember, like, when DC signed on to this show, they didn't know that we were going to be going into so many corners of the DC universe and coming to them, asking them, for this character and that character. They rolled with the punches, I think, extraordinarily well.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking because that part of me, like, I think you're being fairly diplomatic about it, but I'm thinking, like, them getting told no for Ted, supposedly because we're going to use him somewhere else, and here we are 13 years later. Where was he?
Well, I'll tell you, the only time that bothered me, and I was off the show as a showrunner by this point, and the only time that really bothered me was Legends being told that we could no longer use Constantine.
So that was true. The rumor that the reason we didn't have him, why Matt Ryan didn't come back as Constantine, was because he got pulled.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're breaking up. What a bad connection.
No, but that was the hot rumor that was going around. So
there's probably a lot of truth to that rumor, is probably all I'll say. But yeah, I think I've got myself into enough trouble.
No. If I put it this way, we knew there was a Constantine show coming to HBO Max by J.J. Abrams, and so I think everyone could kind of put the pieces together. That
I would say that was pretty. In that case, that was a realistic, deduction, and it's obviously, given the fact that that show never came to pass, it's particularly disappointing that we had to, shift gears with Matt, who is, not just terrific as Constantine, but just a terrific actor in general.
100%.
But I think, look, it's funny. You said I was being diplomatic, and the truth is, I think I'm just being fair. Like, I always tried to be very empathetic to DC's plight when I, was working with them, to the point where, like, they don't know that they're not going to do Ted Cord. They have plans to do Ted Cord, and that's, all they can really go off of. Just like they had plans to do a J.J. Abrams produced Constantine show. I think, sort of managing these characters is a little bit like you're playing chess, but you're playing chess off of, 5 different chessboards at the same time, all without an idea as to, how those games are going to play out. So that sort of, it sort of goes to my philosophy, of, I always try very, very hard to not get angry if someone does something I don't like or makes a decision that I don't agree with, because they're coming to it with their own point of view, and there's a saying: don't ascribe to malice what can easily be ascribed to mistake, and sometimes people just make mistakes. It happens. It's not nothing is. And DC never, they never like did anything with malicious intent. It was always, like I said, they're playing 5 different games of chess, probably even more than that, all at the same time.
Fair enough. I think the reason I the way I look at it is that, well, because they were so quick to then embrace the multiverse aspect, where, like, I'm thinking DC, would it really have hurt that if we had a Ted Core on Arrow for a couple of years, and then eventually when you did your even though it never come to fruition, whatever they were going to do with Ted would have happened, so on, because because I can't imagine how frustrating it must be as a showrunner having to alter plans, but not last minute, but again, they say no to him, but how about this? And then you still, but you guys, that still comes with extra work of having to figure out, how do we fit in Ray Palmer into this world where, like, how do we do the suit? How do we do the powers and stuff like that? That
suit, I gotta say, like, I mean, Maya Manny and Ken Harlow, our costume designer and prop master, I don't think, again, they get enough credit for that Atom suit. That Atom suit is that thing is a marvel. It's got electronics in it. It's got, like, it's a movie quality costume. It cost, like, the first, it's a little bit like a prescription drug. The second pill, costs 99 cents, but the first pill costs $3 billion. The first iteration of, the first version of the costume, that cost over $250,000, which was insane. Like, to spend, certainly the studio thought we were completely mad. But it's all, these are all custom fitted pieces, that all go together. It's literally like, it's a costume that required a handler. Like, there was literally a technician that would travel with the costume. And it's simply amazing. It's probably my, I'm often asked, like, what's my favorite Arrowverse costume? And I that's the Atom costume is probably it. It's simply because it's such an ambitious piece of work.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, even though, like, I'm sure it was really heavy for Brandon. I mean, because people thinking, oh, he's a big dude, he can take it. Like, no, it looked.
Oh no, it's heavy. It's, I mean, it literally, like, it came in its own like series of cases, like these special protective cases that unroll.
Oh wow.
Yeah, like, I mean, the thing was, a huge undertaking. And it's got, like I said, cables and electronics, and, like, there's gears that are actually moving. Like, I think some people thought, because in a lot of movies, if you've got something like a gear that's spinning, they'll usually add that in post. And it's like, no, that was all practical.
No,
like,
that looked real.
Yeah, it's all real. It's all real. It's amazing. It's like I remember us going through the process of building it, and going up to Vancouver and being in the workshops and going like, how is this ever going to work? How is this ever going to come together? And Ken and Maya, man, they always had faith in it. They always knew how it was going to turn out. If you look at Maya's original design, it looks like the original design. There's no compromise to it. There were no corners cut. I think it was the best $250,000 that the shows had ever spent.
Hey, how you doing, party people? Let me whisper in your ear. Tell you a little something you might like to hear. What's going on, brothers and sisters? It's your man, Brother Nate from the Lituation Room, as well as the Kings of Sport podcast. And I'm here to tell you about the Multiverse of Color. See, the Showrunner Whisperer is brought to you exclusively by Multiverse of Color. Now, Multiverse of Color is your home for fresh takes on the world of pop culture by established journalists and emerging content creators. It's your one-stop destination for a vast array of articles as well as audio and video productions. Multiverse of Color features exclusive interviews, media event coverage, and film analysis. We're talking about all films, all movies out here on these streets, from Hollywood's biggest blockbusters to the most intimate of independent projects. So visit multiverseofcolor.com today, yes, today, right now, for all of the latest stories, and follow Multiverse of Color through the social media links provided in the description below. And now, back to the Showrunner Whisperer.
Now, by the time having been away from that franchise for a little bit, do you hope to revisit it at some point? I know last year was it's one of the things that came out in your newsletter was how you were feeling about these studios and stuff like that, and I know I definitely had thoughts on it and stuff, but like now that you've it's been a couple of years since you finished the shows, since you got you got to this point. Would you want to revisit this genre in any way possible? Like where are you? Again, if you can tease, and I want to talk about your upcoming book as well. Do you want to revisit this genre, or do you feel like you're now on a path of focusing on different chapters for your career?
Oh, that's interesting. It's funny. It never occurred to me to do something different. I would love to revisit it. Certainly I would love to do another superhero property. And I'd love to revisit Arrow specifically. Stephen and I, talk about it, every now and again. I think prefer to wait a little bit longer before revisiting Oliver. I'd love to do something in the comic book space to sort of. I'd love to do something where we kind of give a proper ending to the Arrowverse. And I think the only way to do that probably would be through a comic book, but I don't know, maybe,
animated movie.
I was funny. I was just about to say, like, maybe an animated movie, I think, and I think that would be really, really great. I would love to give it its proper end. So that would be fun. And then, it's funny. Like I said, I'd love to, do another superhero property. But it's not the only thing that I'm interested in doing. The way I always say, like, I work for 10-year-old me. If 10-year-old me would get excited, then I usually say yes.
Yeah, no, because I know you came very close to, with Green Lantern on for HBO Max, because again, I know the first time with Green Lantern it had end results that you guys were probably not hoping for. Again, as someone who has seen those original scripts that came out that you guys had written, I'm like, oh, if only we could have gotten that, because I love the extraness that we got of Hal and Carol, and instead we just got them in real life with Blake and Ryan for the rest of their lives.
Well, Ryan, Blake, you're welcome. You know,
Yeah,
I'm glad something long lasting came from that movie. Yeah, you know, you just never know. I also think, I will say, you know, I look, Green Lantern turned out very differently from what we had planned, and you alluded to our earlier drafts. And but I will say, like, even the finished product, I think if you were to grade it on the curve of a lot of superhero movies that have come before and since, I think Green Lantern holds up better, if
he
graded.
definitely does. And I'm not saying this just to blow smoke up here, because I was like, you know, I know it has this issue, but it's not as problematic as people say it out to be. You know, I mean, you know, I've seen far worse, even, you know, within the last 3-4 years. I'm not gonna name any names, but you know.
Yeah. No, I have certainly found myself watching certain superhero movies going, and you gave me shit for Green Lantern?
Mhm.
You know, so yeah, you know, again, I always say grade me on a curve. But you know, I also, you know, I also, if had it not been for the Green Lantern experience, there wouldn't be Arrow, you know, and there wouldn't be an Arrowverse. You know, Arrow very much came directly from the experience that we had on Green Lantern, and you know, I think, you know, that's how you learn in life, is, you know, you gotta you know, try some things that don't necessarily work out the way you intended.
If you can, I mean, I know there's probably not much you can say about it, but is there anything you can share about your time on the Green Lantern show?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it was going to be awesome. It was going to be great. Like, we had James Mangold's go-to production designer. We had the the woman who designs the costumes for The Boys and a million other superhero shows. We
You
had
got Laura Jean for the Green. Oh
Yes.
my
Yeah.
god!
Oh, and you should see those costumes. By the way, not a single bit of CG in any of them. Um, I have the designs, like, on my phone. Like, yeah. Oh God, they looked amazing. We had, I mean, the production art, like, it would blow you away. Honestly, like, stuff that looked, not only looked incredible, but looked like a movie. We had an amazing writing staff. We had, you know, we'd written all 8 scripts of the first season, so I know what the show would have been. You know, and it was going to be, you know, emotional and exciting, with 2 different time periods, and some, you know, I think incredibly strong character work that was, you know, very true to the, it was very, very true to the franchise of Green Lantern. And it yeah, bums me out. But you know, unfortunately, that's the reality of doing TV in, you know, the 2020s, is you can write an entire season of television and not shoot a frame. And it didn't always used to be that way, but it is that way now. And it's a bummer. You know, it takes a lot of self-control some days to avoid going on Instagram or Twitter and being like, this is what you could have had.
I was so ready for Simon Boz, you know, as a Middle Eastern myself, you know, because
Sure.
I know how important that story is, especially in today's political climate. So you know, that
We
day
have a wonderful, like, our plans for Simon were really cool. The costume that Laura had designed for him was amazing. Yeah, we had some really, really, really cool plans. It's it's a bummer. That's all I'll say.
no, I understand. And well, let's talk about In Any Lifetime. First of all, I saw, you know, again, the cover was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that
they did
was
an amazing job. Actually, I will say, like, you know, the Amazon, you know, the Amazon publisher, like, they had originally designed a completely different design for the cover of the book, and on their own, to use the legal term sua sponte, decided it wasn't good enough, and literally went back to the drawing board and came up with a completely different design. And it was, you know, it's pretty cool.
Well, what I'm interested in, because again, when you and I had initially start talking about setting up this interview and talking about this book, I was really like, I wonder what he's writing about, because you've written so much in your career, and you're dealing now with you're going back to a territory that has been now very has exploded now in Hollywood. It is Hollywood genre with the multiverse. How was it? How challenging was it to kind of find a new angle to it? Because some might say, how much multiverse do we need? I mean, even with Marvel, they're even struggling with it right now. So, like, what are you bringing to this concept that we haven't maybe seen before?
Well, first of all, I've been working on this book in some way, shape, or form for the last 10 years. So I started working on it before the multiverse really was a thing, and before I had gotten involved with Crisis on Infinite Earths and playing around with the multiverse that way. But the way it's different is the way the multiverse operates. In the book, basically, there's this, the way we put it is, the universe favors certain outcomes. It's why on every planet there's oxygen, on every planet there's people, on every planet there's X, Y, and Z. And because the multiverse favors certain outcomes, the protagonist who's trying to find his deceased wife, there's only one universe where his wife is still alive. And so it's not like a version of the multiverse where you have 50 million universes, you get 50 million different versions of a person. This is a much more, I would say, unforgiving multiverse, particularly since the universe itself is actually trying to stop the protagonist and is throwing obstacles up in the protagonist's way. So the idea of sort of the many worlds theory of multiverses, where you get an infinite number of very, very different universes, we go the opposite direction in the novel. And it, we still have, we have some craziness, some multiversal craziness, but for the most part, it's a very unusual way of approaching parallel universes. It's sort of like the opposite of the way you've seen parallel universes typically portrayed in comic books and film and books and whatnot.
Because when I was reading the synopsis, I was thinking in the back of my mind, I wonder if he's planning to do a show or a movie out of this, like, because I could kind of almost like see some of the story beats of like in live action. Is that something that you're contemplating, maybe?
It's funny, whenever I do something in either comics or prose, there's always the possibility that it could find a second life in TV or film. In my perfect world, I wouldn't be the one to adapt my own work.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In many ways, like, it's funny, I'm doing it now with Too Dead to Die, which is the graphic novel I did with Howard Chaykin. And I adapted that as a film for Universal. But for the most part, when I tell a story, I've told the story and I've sort of scratched the itch. So I don't have an overwhelming desire to reapproach it in another medium. But I would never say never. And I do think, I structured the novel the same way I would structure a movie with 3 acts, and it had, I think it's sort of like, you can take the boy out of screenplays. You can't take the screenplays out of the boy. My brain still tends to work in terms of cinematic structure. So I imagine the novel would be fairly easy to adapt into a film, but I would love it if it was another writer doing the adapting.
That's fair. Well, that's fair. I know we're starting to run out of time, but I am before I ask my last question, hopefully, maybe we can have another sit down, once the book has come out, because I would love to talk to you about it and other things we were able to talk about on this interview regarding your showrunner journey. But for my final question about showrunning, if if you could talk to fans or critics directly in terms of like their perception of show running, if there's a misconception you could clear up, what would that misconception? What would you want to clear up personally about the idea of show running?
That's a great question. I think I'd want to disabuse anyone of the notion that it's easy. It's a really hard job. And it's not that it's not occasionally fun, and it's not that it's not occasionally rewarding. Otherwise, I don't know why anyone would do it. But it's hard. It's hard, and I think it's a little. I imagine, having never given birth to anyone, that it's a little bit like the pain of childbirth, where when you're going through it, it's excruciating, and very conveniently you start to forget how brutal it was. But I also will say it is very, very rewarding. I really enjoy working with other people. I enjoy the collaborative nature of show running, and I enjoy I enjoy the challenges that come with the difficulties as much as I enjoy everything else. But there's nothing quite like feeling like you've helped put together something special, both in terms of a work environment and in terms of a finished product. That's a great adrenaline rush that is it never gets old.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for sharing your long journey, the odyssey, if you will, the ups, the downs, the crazy and the fun. So I cannot wait for people to hear this and your experience. Again, you're running some of the biggest shows of this generation, especially something as huge as Arrowverse. So yeah, thank you for your time today. Thank you, Mark, again so much for your time, and also just thank you for all the interactions over the years, and the fact that you even remembered me. I was kind of like,
oh, of course, yeah. Oh no, absolutely. No, it's always good to talk to you, man. It's been far too long.
Yeah, it's been far too long. Hopefully we can talk very soon again. So yeah, take care of yourself, and I will see you when I see you.
Sounds good. All right, thanks, man.
And welcome back. That was my second part and the final part of my MARC Guggenheim interview. So major thank you to Mark for his generosity and generous time. We had a great time chatting about his career, about the ups and downs and the in between, and hopefully we'll have him back in the very near future, because I'm excited to see what he does next. But yeah, I want to remind you that we're going to be back in August with another episode, because again, because we had to push off part 2 till to this Wednesday, that means that there won't be an episode on the 31st as planned. But yeah, it's gonna be fun. We have more episodes being recorded and lots of more conversations going on. But if you want to find me, because I'm gonna just insert here right now that you're gonna start hearing like a pre-recorded intro and outro now for the Showrunner Whisperer when we get because it's basically I'm saying the same thing every week, and I feel like every week I say I forget something or I leave something out. But if you want to find me, you can find me at Andy Behbakht on all social media: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, Vero, Twitch, Kick, TikTok, you name it, Threads. I'm on there. I'm a senior writer and interviewer for ScreenRant.com, so I cover all the superhero stuff that exists out there for the news and interviews team. So I have lots of stuff that just come out, so check it out. I'm also the editor-in-chief of Multiverse of Color, as you heard before, and that's where you can find me at. And yeah, all the links to my stuff is in the show notes. So if you want to, just a simple link where you can find me, just click on the show notes below, and it will take you to all them good places. But yeah, I'm going to leave it over to my past, future me. That's a good question. I'm going to head over to my other me for the plugs for the podcast. But once again, thank everyone so much for tuning for the MARC Guggenheim chat, and look forward to more interviews coming up. And yeah, with that said, let's find out where you can find the Showrunner Whisperer at. To find the Showrunner Whisperer online, visit ShowrunnerWhisperer.com, where you can get all the latest episodes as well as exclusives from some of our interviews with said showrunners. If you want to email or contact Showrunner Whisperer, you can contact us at ShowrunnerWhisperer@gmail.com. On social media, we're at Showrunner Talk and at Multiverse Color on Twitter. On Instagram /Threads, we're at Showrunner Whisperer and at the Multiverse of Color. On Facebook, we're at Showrunner Whisperer and at Multiverse of Color. And on TikTok, we're at Showrunner Whisperer and at Multiverse of Color. Remember, the Showrunner Whisperer is a Multiverse of Color Originals, which is your destination for pop culture from the lens of people of color and members of the LGBTQ plus community. So please visit multiverseofcolor.com for all the latest news and reviews and interviews. And if you want to subscribe to the Showrunner Whisperer, we're available on multiple platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Podchaser, Amazon Music, Deezer, Ghana, Podcast Index, Castbox, Podcast Addict, Radio Public, YouTube Podcasts, Audible, Podbean, and everywhere else you can find your podcast at. Also, while you're on Apple Podcasts, do us a favor, as we would massively appreciate if you want to help support the show. Leave us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts and let us know what you enjoy most about the show and what we can do to improve the podcast. Leaving us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts will help us get elevated in the Apple Podcast store so that more people can discover the Showrunner Whisperer, as not everyone is on social media these days, and this is how they discover their shows directly for Apple Podcasts. We would massively appreciate your support and your time. On behalf of my entire media team, Julian Bell, Mike Schmidt, Nate Milton, I'm Andy Behbakht, and we will see you on the next episode of the Showrunner Whisperer.